What's going on, guys? So if you are a renter right now, this might be the most important video you ever watch, especially if you're trying to decide if now is the perfect time to buy your first place or if it makes more sense to keep renting. I know for a lot of you guys, it can be a really big decision, especially if it's your first time ever doing it. And a lot of people online, especially, the more affluent YouTubers out there, will definitely say to keep renting because they own a lot of apartments and they want you to keep renting. I mean, it's literally what they're selling to the mass public. So I want to break it down different for you guys today. I want to actually put it in a spreadsheet, show you guys the numbers behind the thought process and why it may or may not make sense for you. I have been in your shoes. I've been a renter. I've owned and sold multiple personal residences over the years. I've actually made a lot of personal wealth by doing so. So I'm going to walk you through all of that today in this video, and let's just dive in. Okay, so if you've been looking at the market, you might be a little scared because one, interest rates are really high. It seems like the economy is slowing down a little bit. And you might be getting spooked by some of the news out there and thinking it may not be a good time to buy. On the flip side of that, you may also be hearing news that it's a buyer's market right now because sellers have basically inundated the market with tons of listings right now. And we're starting to see some price reduction for the first time in the last 5 years. So the news is a little bit conflicting right now, but I want to walk you through the numbers because I think if you're trying to compare this apples to apples, it's gonna be pretty eye-opening for you. So what I want to do is I want to think back to 2020 and basically look at if you had bought something in 2020 versus rented in 2020, how much would you have made or lost doing both routes and which one would have made the most sense? And I get that the last 5 years have been a little bit unique with hyperinflation, appreciation across the country, some extreme real estate conditions. But on the other hand, in the last 200 years of the real estate world in the US, markets have pretty much always gone up. There are very few exceptions where real estate has not gone up in value over the course of time. So even if you buy something when it's really high, you can always refinance and pull out money later when rates come back down and prices end up going back up. So with that said, we're going to use 2020 as an example, and we're going to use Orange County, California, because it was an area that saw a lot of interest from people, from both buyers and sellers, but especially buyers. So if you were competing against other individuals during the time, there was a lot of worry back then that you were overpaying for stuff. But I want to show you that if you'd actually bought back then, you would have made a lot of money. So we're going to use $450,000 as our base price for a condo at the time because that was pretty much in line with Orange County averages. And we're going to use $2,600 as the rental value for that time because that was what you could pretty much get a one bedroom for around that time as well. So something I want to start off showing you guys is in Zillow, if you go to any active listing, there's usually a calculator down at the bottom of the listing where you can plug in numbers for anything you're looking at. It doesn't have to be that specific listing. You can just change the numbers to be whatever you want. So I went to a random listing in my neighborhood and I'm pulling up the calculator right here. This is basically a free calculator to calculate mortgage payments. And so what I'm doing is I'm putting in $450,000 purchase price. I'm going to do a 20% down payment for this first example, but I'm also going to show you an example with a 5% down payment in case you don't have a lot of money to do a down payment. And back then the interest rate was actually a lot lower for most people, but we're going to use 3.15. I know it's a lot higher now. Don't worry, we're going to get to a high interest rate example later in the video, but I want to show you guys what this looks like had you bought 5 years ago. So assuming you did all that, you wouldn't have mortgage insurance because you put 20% down in most situations. Your property taxes would have been about $401 a month. Home insurance would have been about $158 a month. And honestly, that's a little high. Even for out here in California, that's still a little high. So it's probably lower than that, but we'll go with that. HOA fees, $500 a month. Probably a little bit lower back then, but for now, we'll just plug that in as just a general rule of thumb for condos. And real quick, if you're thinking about doing a single family home or a condo, or maybe you're just worried about maintaining real estate for the first time in your life because you've never owned before, I always recommend to friends and family to go the condo route. I know that there can be some disadvantages to going the condo route, such as HOA fees, special assessments, Melrose taxes, all that kind of stuff. But if you're new to home ownership and you don't know how to manage all of that, because again, when you own something, you're in charge of maintaining the roof, the landscaping, the outside, the inside, everything that comes with that property is now on your shoulders, right? So by going the condo route, you have a little bit of a breathing room to kind of learn how to own your own place because you're only in charge of stuff inside the walls, whereas the condo association controls everything outside of the walls. So if the roof goes bad, or if your balcony rusts and needs replacement, or there's landscaping issues, then the HOA will handle all of that. You're only responsible for what's inside your unit, which as a first-time home buyer or first-time homeowner can be really beneficial as you're trying to learn how to navigate that whole world. And look, before you head to the comments, I know there's gonna be people that are like, well, HOA fees are really high, or what if you get a special assessment and you're hit with, a huge lump sum payment that you weren't expecting? Well, you should ask your realtor before you buy it. You want to see HOA increase history, see how much they've gone up over the years. You want to ask if there's any special assessments coming. You want to ask if there's any litigation against the HOA before you buy it. So a lot of that falls on your shoulders, and more so your realtor's shoulders, to make sure that you're getting a good deal and that you're buying somewhere that makes sense for you long term. You don't want to buy something that's having a lot of issues. So make sure you do your homework before you actually close on the unit. Okay, so let's go back to the spreadsheet. I want to show you guys a breakdown. So we've got the price and the value right here, $450,000 for the unit, like I mentioned. And over here in the rent column, since we're not actually buying it, the value is 0. Now, if I slide down, uncover all this stuff. So the money down is the down payment. And in this case, we're doing 20% down, so it's $90,000. For the rental side, since we're not doing a down payment, I put that more as like a security deposit. So we're just doing 1 month's rent as security deposit, okay? Your monthly payment, $1,547, which I got over here from the mortgage payment. So that's your mortgage and interest, your principal and your interest payment, basically. And then obviously, $2,600 is the cost of renting a similar unit in the same neighborhood. Property taxes, you have to pay those on your condo, so about $401 a month. That's included in the rent on your rental, so you're not paying property taxes. I mean, you are, but it's already looped or lumped into that amount. Same with HOA, you're not paying that on a rental unit, but you are on a condo. For insurance, it's a little bit higher for a condo because you're insuring not only everything inside of it, but you're also insuring the building and the condo unit itself. Whereas with renter's insurance, you're basically just insuring your valuables. And for some places, they might make you insure other things, but usually it's pretty cheap. It's like 20 to 40 bucks a month if you have it. A lot of people don't even have it. So I put it in here for 35 bucks, which is on the high end. And then PMI, we don't have any on this one because we're doing 20% down payment. If you don't know what PMI is, you should go Google it. I'm not going to dive into it in this video, but basically if you have less than a 20% down payment, you end up having to pay PMI or private mortgage insurance, which helps cover any delinquencies on your end for the bank. And it's a requirement, but it's not as bad as it sounds because I'm gonna explain why in a little bit. And then the loan amount, which is the final thing in here because, again, you're taking a loan to buy the condo. 80% of the value of the condo is basically in the form of debt, which is $360,000 after you take away the $90,000 down payment. So the next thing to talk about is tax deductions. When you own real estate, you get a lot of tax benefits. As your personal residence, you don't get as many tax benefits as an investment property, such as depreciation, but you do get SALT deductions, which is basically a standard deduction to deduct the interest payments on your loan. And it's up to $10,000, although it may change this year. They're looking at upping it with the new tax laws coming out. But as of right now, it's $10,000. So that's actually a benefit to you because it's a $10,000 write-off against your taxes each year. Whereas if you're renting, you don't get that. So total monthly cost for each, this is literally, I'm basically just adding up everything that's going into the monthly cost. So as you can see, for a buy or a purchase, you're at $2,605, and for rent, you're at the $2,600 per month plus the $35 a month insurance. So not much going into that one. And then if you multiply it by 12, you get your annual cost for each. Now, again, we're doing this over a 5-year period from 2020 to 2025. And what you need to look at is with a 30-year fixed mortgage, it's exactly that, it's fixed. So your cost per year or per month do not go up each year. The only thing that could go up are property taxes and HOA fees, which if you did your homework and you found the right place, should be pretty minimal. I didn't factor that in here because again, it's such a small portion. I mean, at the end of it, it's probably only a couple grand over the long-term 5 years. So I wouldn't worry about it too much in your calculations. It's more about just trying to figure out what makes the most sense for you. Now, with the rental, in California, we have rent control. So I capped it at 5% annual increases. Keep in mind, rent during these 5 years really jumped a lot. So this is being pretty conservative compared to a lot of other states that saw double-digit rent growth on units across the country. So again, I'm being really conservative here, but it wouldn't be out of the question to see double-digit rent growth here. So this basically compounds each year with 5% annual increases. So now if we go down to the total amount spent, so the total amount spent for the condo is basically all of those payments added up plus the down payment, and you get to just shy of $250,000 over 5 years. If you look at the rental, it's $167,000 because you're paying all that rent over 5 years with the compounding annual adjustments in the rent. So again, if you're just looking at this, if you're just comparing apples to apples, yeah, spending $250,000 versus almost $170,000, then yeah, renting looks a lot more attractive. But it's really the next few numbers that really break it down and change the opinion. So the next thing you got to keep in mind is that we saw great appreciation across the country in pretty much every market over the last 5 years. So if you bought in 2020, And again, I'm basing this as a condo or a rental property in Orange County, California, more specifically in Irvine, California, which saw 11.6 annual appreciation over the last 5 years. Last year it was crazy high, but it averaged out to be 11.6. This year it's not going to be much, at least so far. So if you do that same compounding calculation where you take the original $450,000 value of the condo and you apply the 11.6 annually, it comes out to just shy of $700,000 as the value of the condo in today's dollars. Obviously, you have no equity or no value for the rental unit because you're just renting, so I left that at 0. And then looking at the SALT deduction, you have 5 years of this mortgage interest deduction, and that's $50,000. But keep in mind, that's just a deduction in your taxes. It's not a credit, so it's not offsetting your taxes. It's just deducting the amount of income that you're showing on your taxes. So if you are in a high tax bracket, it's only about half of that of savings. For a lot of you guys, it'll be more than this, but I wanted to be conservative here, so I just put $25,000, which is about half of the $50,000 of the SALT deductions. And remember, there are no write-offs when you're renting, so there's no benefit here. Okay, so this is the fun part. This is where it all gets added up and you see truly which one makes more sense. Okay, so if you look at this, the total gain, had you bought that condo, would be $206,000, and the total loss for just renting, because you're never gonna see that money again, you are just paying this to another person who owns the property, is $167,874. So how do we get there? Well, let's look at the calculation. So again, you're taking the value of the unit, subtracting the loan amount, subtracting all of the payments that you've made, and then you're adding back the SALT deduction, because again, that is a benefit to you. It's coming back in your taxes, and that comes out to $206,000. It's a much easier calculation for the rental because it's just the total rent you've paid over the last 5 years. So as you can see, if you had bought this unit back in 2020, you would have basically gained $206,000, and that is tax-free because it's under the $250,000 of capital gains for a personal residence. And if you're married, it's $500,000. And again, guys, I have done videos on this. I'll link one up above so you can go watch it. But I have literally made over $1 million of personal equity just by moving every few years of my personal residence and avoiding capital gains because of this exact tax law. Now, keep in mind, this does not include if you were to sell it, you have to pay agent and broker fees, which can be anywhere from 5 to 9% in closing costs. So there would be a little bit of a hit here. But overall, you can see the drastic difference between losing $170,000 or gaining over $200,000. Now, I know some of you in the comments are gonna be like, well, we don't see interest rates like this anymore, or this was a crazy time, or what if you don't have 20% down? I got you, don't worry, let's dive into it. So let's change it on Zillow first so you guys can see it here. And again, you can do this on your end. You just go to any active listing in Zillow or Redfin, and you go down to their little calculator section. It's free, and you can basically just take whatever you're looking at, even if it's off market, plug it in here, and it'll do all the numbers and usually pull in a pretty accurate interest rate for whatever you're gonna see on your own deal. So it's a really great free way to just do some quick math. But at 5% down, you're looking at a $22,500 down payment. So again, guys, this isn't much money in the grand scheme of things. I know for some people watching this, it might be a lot of money, but if you're trying to buy real estate, especially at the $450,000 mark or somewhere around there, if you can't come up with $22,500, then it probably does make sense to keep renting while you build that up. You don't want to take a loan for that amount of money. I mean, you never want to take a loan to get another loan. You know what I mean? You want to actually have that in cash ready to go. So I've done a ton of videos about side hustles and how to make extra money. Go watch those, ask ChatGPT, ask your friends, pick up an extra job. All you gotta do is build up that initial down payment because that starts the clock on basically going after all this appreciation in your own personal real estate. So make sure you have enough money for the down payment. Coming back to this, 5% down, $22,500 for the down payment. If you're in middle America or some of the other states, your house price or your condo price could be half this or it could be a lot lower. And another thing to keep in mind, if you're a first-time home buyer, a lot of states have programs for as little as 5% down, or they even have credits or tax incentives or other benefits. So make sure you look into that if it's your first time buying. There are some really great programs out there right now, and it's literally like free money. So look into that as well. But coming back to this, we're using the same interest rate, 30-year fixed, 22.5 down payment on $450,000. So obviously the principal and interest payments have gone up because you're putting less down. You now have PMI or mortgage insurance. Again, not to worry about, even though it's $300 a month, don't worry about it. As long as you can cover the monthly payments, it's gonna be worth it in the end, I guarantee you, assuming there's appreciation. We're gonna talk about that. And then the property taxes, home insurance, and HOA fees, those don't change because they're the exact same regardless of the down payment amount. So I plugged all of those back into our little calculator on the Excel sheet, and as you can see, it's pretty much the exact same, just different payments, and then adding the PMI, And then the loan amount has obviously changed because you're putting less down, but it stays the same on the rental side. Okay, so let's scroll down. So the tax deductions are the exact same because it's still the standard deduction that you can't go past that right now unless they change the tax law. So it's still gonna be 10K no matter what you put down. The total monthly cost though has jumped quite a bit because again, you put a lot less down, so your payments are a lot higher. So now you're looking at about $3,200 all in per month, not including utilities. So the total annual cost has gone up pretty substantially, but again, it's still only a little bit more than if you were to rent. And if you're renting, you're never seeing that money again, ever. So here are the values if you were to go years 2 through 5. As you can see, pretty much fixed as we talked about. Over here, we're doing that same 5% annual increase on the rent. And then if we come down, the total spent is actually interesting because we put less down. We put a much smaller down payment. So it's actually lower than the first example, which might seem weird because we're paying more monthly, but the amount that we're paying more monthly and annually doesn't compete with the amount that is actually reduced in the down payment because we're only putting a quarter down than we did before. We put down 90K on the first example. We're only putting down 22.5 on this one. And then total spent on the rent side is the exact same as the last example because nothing's changed there. And then the total value of the unit is the exact same. So we use the exact same unit with the exact same appreciation, 11.6% annually, and we're right there. And then the SALT deduction, as I explained earlier, is the exact same. It would be even probably higher here because if you can't make the full down payment, then your income probably isn't high enough to have half of it go to taxes, especially in California. So again, that's pretty darn conservative, but let's look at the final answer. So again, total gain versus total loss. So it's a smaller gain than the first time around. It's only $104,000, but your loss is the exact same because you're renting the exact same unit. So you can see the difference here. Even with only 5% down, you're still netting almost $100,000. Keep in mind, it'll be a little bit less after the closing costs if you were to actually sell the condo. But you could also just refi potentially and pull some money out. Now, it might be a little tricky right now with rates. We're about to touch on that in a second. But again, this just shows the breakdown and how different this all is. Now, it might be good before we dive into the high rate in today's dollars to mention that if you live in an area where appreciation isn't as high as Orange County, which is most of the country, I totally get it. You might be thinking, well, this doesn't really apply to me or my area. So a couple things to talk about real quick. You can look up the annual appreciation rate in your area through Redfin, through Realtor.com, through Zillow. You can also look at like ChatGPT. You can look at the historical changes. You can look at the last 5 years, 10 years, etc. You can average it out. You can get a pretty good idea of which direction and trajectory your area is headed in and how it will affect you in the long term if you stay there 5-10 years. Now, let's say you do all that and the appreciation is still really low. Maybe it's only like 2% annually or it's not that high. Well, then it makes sense to find something where you force the appreciation. And I did that on my first condo. I bought one of the junkier units in a nice building and I personally went in and like improved it myself. I hand painted everything. I literally took all the cabinets down, sanded them, hand painted them out on my balcony, changed the hardware, put them back in, and I literally just went room from room while I lived there over 4 years, improving every room, every which way that I could, and forcing the value, forcing the appreciation of the unit. And it's not as scary as it sounds. I mean, you don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to spend a ton of money to do it. You can do it in little pieces. You can do it, as you live there, move stuff around. It doesn't have to all be at once. And the best part about doing it that way is you're buying a cheaper unit, so your monthly cost is going to be a lot lower, and you can use those savings to then improve the unit and make up much more on the exit. So again, don't be scared if appreciation is lower in your area. The one I'm using here as an example, it's been pretty good over the last few years. This year, it's down a little bit, countrywide, but again, like you can force the appreciation if you don't have it high in your area. All right, guys, so now let's move on to an example that's more applicable in like today's dollars because interest rates are high right now. I'm going to use over 7% on this. I'm going to use 7.15%, which for a lot of you guys on a personal residence is probably higher than what you're going to run into today, but you never know. Rates are all over the place right now. We're going to use that same $450,000 example, but we're going to use 5% down on this, just like the last one, rather than 20% down, because I want to show you guys, even if you can barely afford a down payment, even in today's high rates, let's see what this looks like over 5 years. So we're going to use the same $450,000 down just so you can see the comparison because I want to change the value of the condo. It's going to throw off you being able to compare it to the other ones. So let's just say you're buying a $450,000 place in today's dollars and it follows the same rough appreciation curve over the last 5 years that the last 5 years have shown us. Okay, so here are all the numbers imported from over here. So as you can see, with a 7.15 interest rate, the payments jump up to $4,887 a month just in principal and interest. So it's a lot higher than when rates were half that. So I've got that reflected here. Obviously, property taxes, HOA, insurance, PMI, all of that is the same because all we're doing is just changing the interest rate. We're not changing the down payment amount. We're not changing the value of the unit. We're not changing the loan amount. It's just because interest rates are higher. And obviously, we're using that exact same rent example of a one bedroom going for $2,600 a month, which is actually kind of low for today's dollars in Orange County, but let's just run with it to keep the numbers the same. Again, exact same tax deductions, SALT. And then the monthly cost, though, you can see is substantially higher. So unfortunately, this will price a lot of people out of today's market just because of the affordability of the monthly payment. But hopefully, wherever you live, condos are going for a lot less than $450,000. And as you can see, the total annual cost now is $50,000 versus $31,000. So the biggest difference between these two, with the rate being higher, is now your monthly and annual costs are substantially higher. So for this one, to comfortably live, you'd have to be making about $100,000 a year. You know, about 30% of your income should go towards housing. You can stretch it a little bit for if it's a place you own, but about $100,000 annual income for this one. Now, because rates are so high, you need like roughly $150,000, $140,000 of income. So it does make the affordability a little bit more tricky, but let's keep running the numbers. Here we're keeping, again, costs per month and per year roughly fixed. Again, there's gonna be a little bit of changes there with the HOA fees and property taxes, depending on what state you're in and where you are. But for sake of conversation, we're keeping it fixed. And then the rent over here climbing at that same exact 5% annual increases in rent, just so you guys can see the comparison side by side for each one. Okay, total spent $276,000. Okay, now we're starting to see where even with the 5% down payment, the cost overall is much higher than even the 20% down payment because of that stupid interest rate being so high right now. This is the exact same as all the other examples because we're using the exact same rental unit as the example. The value of the unit on exit is also the exact same on all these examples because we're using the exact same appreciation for the exact same unit, just showing you guys the different numbers and how interest rates and down payments can affect it. And here's that exact same SALT deduction, which is actually now a little bit more accurate. Still not perfectly accurate because your income would have to be a little bit higher to afford something like this right now because of the interest rate. So your tax bracket probably is a little bit higher. Still not probably high enough to warrant a almost 48, 49%, which is pretty much the highest it can be in California. But anyway, using this as an example, again, just to compare to the others. So where does that leave us on the gain or loss? Total gain, only $41,000, and the loss is still the same as all the other examples because it's the same rental unit. But guys, you are still in the green if you were to buy with a high interest rate with only 5% down, with pretty ridiculous market conditions. You're still in the green over 5 years, which is really, really interesting because a lot of people think that in today's world with the high interest rates, you won't actually exit in the green. And truthfully, 5 years from now, rates should probably have come down a little bit. You might get a chance to refinance, either pull some money out or lower your payments. And hopefully the market will get better than it is currently right now. Again, it is a little bit of a buyer's market. Hopefully in the future, it'll become a seller's market again. And maybe you'll do better than this. This is, again, a pretty conservative estimate overall. So I would be surprised if you didn't do better than this. And keep in mind, most recessions last about 11 months. So if you have this for 5 years or longer, there's a very good chance that you will avoid the recessions. You can figure out the best time to sell it that makes sense for you. And like I mentioned earlier, you can avoid capital gains tax if you live there personally, up to $250,000 on the gain, or $500,000 for a married couple. So for example, if you bought it for $500K and now it's worth $750K, you're not paying any tax on that $250 gain, you personally, unless it goes over the $750. And if you bought it for $500K and now it's worth $1 million and you are married and live there, all of that is tax-free as well. Once you go over the $1 million, then it starts to get kicked in. And you have to live there a minimum of 2 years as your personal residence. But I mean, that's a pretty amazing deal. And if you don't have kids yet and you're able to move around, you can start really building wealth that way. And that's exactly what I covered in that one video. So be sure to go check that out if you haven't seen it yet. But anyway, guys, I hope this demonstrates why getting into the real estate market and getting out of the rent cycle can be so beneficial to you. And don't get me wrong, I know it's incredibly hard saving up for that first down payment. It took me a few years to get there, from starting work out of college to saving up and officially buying my first place. but it is so worth it in the end to get out of that rent cycle, because when you're renting, you are never seeing that money again. There are no tax benefits. Rent keeps going up, whereas when you're buying your own place on a 30-year fixed mortgage, your expenses stay relatively fixed, minus some increased costs here and there on property taxes, probably insurance going up a little bit, HOA fees if there is one, and landscaping charges and all that kind of stuff that may go up annually. But it's nothing in comparison to what you're going to see on the rental side, or having to move around and do new rental applications that cost money, or the time and energy it takes to do all that, the security deposits, all that kind of stuff. So even in today's market where it's a little bit scary to jump into real estate, I still think it's really worth a strong consideration no matter where you live, because again, even if appreciation isn't that strong in your area, you can force it by finding the right unit, doing the work yourself, or hiring somebody to do it over time and adding value. But anyway, guys, I hope that helps break it down for you, especially if you're in that situation where you're trying to figure it out. I have a ton of real estate videos, investing videos, and just general money-making tips. So if you're bored and you want to binge some more content, I'll leave a good playlist right here for you to go watch. But that's it for today's video. Thanks so much for checking it out, and I'll see you hopefully next time.